Hey everybody, I'm Letty, and today we are doing my October reading wrap-up. And so we're going to be going over the books that I read in October, and I'm going to be letting you guys know what I thought of them. So we can go ahead and get started. The first book that I read in October was Heirs of Falcon it's actually by a few different authors. I just have A.L. Swords written down. Because I read Heirs of Falcon Point directly after Codes of Courage, which I talked about last month as being one of the NetGalley arcs that I read last month. Heirs of Falcon Point is kind of the sequel to that. It takes place in the timeline after Codes of Courage, but it was written before Codes of Courage, so sequel, we're gonna call it. I gave this book 3 stars. It was really interesting, and I think I read it in like a day. No, I know I read it in a day. Like it kept me intrigued, and I wanted to read till the end, and so I read it in a day, and it kept me in until the very end. I mean, I just wanted to know what happened next, and I kept flipping and flipping and flipping. The only reason I gave it 3 stars is because despite being really intriguing and really interesting and enjoyable, it had like no Christianity in it at all. Like, it was not a Christian book. It was just like a clean fiction book. And the thing is that I was like extra disappointed with this because Codes of Courage has big Christian themes in it, and it talks about like faith and stuff. And so to have this Heirs of Falcon Point book, which is like related to the book, which goes with the book, have like no faith in it at all, I was like, wait a second, like, don't these books go together? Shouldn't they both have faith content if one has faith content, you know? It didn't have any faith content, which really surprised me after reading Codes of Courage, which did. So I gave it 3 stars, and that was that. So the next book that I read was Guard Her Heart by Hannah Currie. If you've watched some of the other videos on this channel or seen my Instagram, then you know that I was on the launch team for this book, and so I read an advanced copy of it. But let me tell you, y'all, I loved it. Even if I wasn't on the launch team, like, full on, my actual opinion is that I loved it. It was 5 stars. It was so good. Like, I cannot sing its praises enough, and I would definitely recommend it. I loved it. That's all I can say about it, is I loved it. The next book that I read is A Refuge Assured by Jocelyn Green, which I have right here. So this book is like about a lacemaker who flees France during the French Revolution and comes to America. Because at that time, anything associated with nobility, even the people who make clothes for nobility, were getting beheaded. What can I say about this book? I gave it 3 stars. It was like, the romance was good, the history was good, the story was good. And if it wasn't for one thing, I would have given it a lot more stars. Like, I would have given a higher rating. The problem is that she ends up being the guardian for this 10-year-old boy that some people think is the Dauphin. The Dauphin is, in France, it's the Crown Prince. That's what they call the Crown Prince. So they think he's Louis Charles, which is the Crown Prince. And that is kind of like historically accurate, this plot, because during the French Revolution, Louis Charles was in prison, and he died in prison like a few years after the Revolution. I think he died like after 2 or 3 years of being in prison, but he was heavily abused while in prison. And there were a lot of rumors that he had been replaced and that he was taken into hiding and that the boy in prison was not him. And those rumors were brought forth because of several things. Because they said that he didn't act like Louis Charles has acted before, but his history has explained that the reason he didn't act that way after a couple of years in prison was because of the heavy abuse he went to. The child that died, like, all the witnesses who saw the body just said that like the body was covered in scars. Like there's a lot of evidence that he was heavily, heavily abused. And so a lot of people were like, oh, well, they just replaced him like with a peasant, and that Louis Charles went into hiding. And there were people that came forward after the revolution that claimed they had Louis Charles, like young men that came forward saying, oh, I'm Louis Charles. And so there was a lot of like claims to be that. But they did, I don't know when they did it, but at one point they did a DNA test on the body that was buried, and they did prove that it was Louis Charles. Louis Charles did die in prison. But anyway, so this story is that she ends up the guardian of a young boy who did grow up in Versailles, grew up in the palace as one of the nobleman's sons, as a young noble. So grew up being friends with Louis Charles. So a lot of people think that he is Louis Charles. And because of that, he has like assassination attempts on his life. So she has to protect him. And so the reason I gave this book 3 stars was because it described several of the attempts on this boy's life. His name is Henry in the book. And like, I read books where, you know, the main character is in danger. You know, they might be kidnapped, or they might have their life threatened, or even their life almost taken. I mean, especially in historical fiction, that's a pretty common thing. But to see it happen, like with a 10-year-old boy, and to literally see it described in the pages as people try to suffocate him or stab him, I was like, this kid is 10. Like, it was too much for me. Like, okay, this is a minor spoiler, and I'm sorry, but like at one point, like he's sleeping and somebody has a pillow over his face and is trying to suffocate him. And I was like, it's too much for me. Like, it's a child. I don't want to read that about a child. Like, I just can't. Historically accurate, maybe. Like, I'm sure during the French Revolution it was very violent and worse things were done to children. But it was too much for me, so I took down stars from it. I only gave it 3 stars because the few instances where it described attempts being taken on this boy's life, I was like, this is a child. No, I can't. I'm sorry, no. So I only gave it 3 stars because that did bother me a bit. So, yeah. Okay, so after I read A Refuge Assured, I was planning on reading something else, like a different book, but then I read in Jocelyn Green's author's note that she was working on A Refuge Assured at the same time that Laura Frantz was working on The Lacemaker. And so since they both had lace-making main characters, they kind of got together and they put a little kind of Easter egg in their books that connected their 2 characters. And I was like, that's really cool. Now I want to read that book. So instead of reading what I had next planned, I read The Lacemaker by Laura Frantz next instead. And I liked it so much more than A Refuge Assured. It was really, really good. It took place like at the beginning of the American Revolution, kind of when they were ramping up to it. And like the main character, she's the daughter of a British leader in the colony of Williamsburg, and she falls in love with a patriot. And it's a lot more complicated than that, but we're just going to leave it at that. And I liked it so much more. I actually gave The Lacemaker 5 stars. It was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, okay. So the next book that I read is Daughters of Silk by Linda Lee Chaikin. Okay. Daughters of Silk by Linda Lee Chaikin. This is the first book by this author that I've read. And actually, like, I was getting some books from Pango Books a while back, and I needed, like, just a little more money to get free shipping from the store, and Daughters of Silk was, like, $2 from that store, so I was like, why not? Looks interesting, and I put it in my cart. So this takes place during the French reign of Catherine de' Medici, which technically it's during the reign of her sons, but if we all know history, we all know it was really her reigning through her sons. And it covers the intrigue of the French court during the on and off wars between the Huguenots, which was what the French called Calvinist, and the Catholics during the time of the Reformation. And it is intense, let me tell ya. Like, this author, Linda Lee Chaikin, she does not shy away from the historical intrigues that were at court. And if you know history, then you know Catherine Medici was Machiavellian. That's what is used in the book, is that she's Machiavellian. I mean, she had astrologers, and she dipped into like the dark arts. We know that historically, and it's definitely used in this book. She poisoned people at court that she didn't want around. She had spies all over the French court that she used to keep abreast of what was going on. Like, this book is so intense in the fact that it does not shy away from any of the evils in the French court at this time, both from Catherine Medici herself and from the Catholic leaders who were ruthlessly attacking Huguenots, not because they actually cared about the Reformation. I mean, some of it, I guess, was a little bit because they cared about the Reformation, but honestly because they also wanted to gain power in the court, in the government, and yeah, it's all a big power struggle, and this book does not shy away from that in any sense. It was pretty intense, but also, like, very well researched. Like, you know, some people reading this might be like, oh, there's no way it was that bad at court. But, like, no, trust me, I have a degree in history, and yeah, she did her research, and it's unfortunately pretty accurate. Although I will say that, you know, she's condensing a portion of French history into the confines of a plot. So, you know, some events, and she even says it in her author event, some events are kind of compressed together to fit into the time frame of her novel, but yeah, she's not exaggerating much in this book, unfortunately. So I gave it like 3 stars because I liked Rochelle and Fabian, who are the main characters. I didn't much love the intensity of the court, but I can't really disagree with it because, like, she's accurate. Like, this is historically accurate. So I gave it 3 stars. After I read Daughters of Silk, I went ahead. There's 2 more books in the series, and I went ahead and skimmed through them. They are Written in Silk and Threads of Silk, and I didn't actually read them. I just kind of, like, glanced through and flipped through the pages because I wanted to know what happened with Rochelle and Fabian. I liked them as a couple, and I wanted to see their conclusion, but I didn't want to sit there and read through all of the intrigues of the French court because, I don't know, I just didn't care that much. So I did flip through them to see the conclusion of the story. I'm not going to give them ratings here because, like I said, I didn't actually read the full books. I only skimmed, so I don't think I can really give them accurate ratings. I will say, though, that when I got to the end of Threads of Silk, it kind of ended on a bit of a cliffhanger, and then at the bottom of it, it said book 4 coming in the next year. I think it said 2008 or 2009. I mean, they're pretty old books. But then there never was a book 4. It ended at book 3, so it kind of ended on a cliffhanger. I don't know what happened to book 4. I guess it got canceled. So then, at that point, I was like, well, now I'm kind of glad I only skimmed through the second 2 books and didn't take the time to fully read them because I would have been really disappointed to put all that time in and then not have the conclusion of the story. So yeah, I skimmed through those. And then the last book that I read in the month was A Daring Sacrifice by Jody Hedlund. This is actually a reread for me. I've read it before, but after spending all that time, like, skimming through the Chaikin books, which I didn't necessarily care about, but I wanted to know the conclusion of, I was like, I really just want to read a book in the last couple of days of this month that I know I'll love. So I reread A Daring Sacrifice. It's kind of a gender-bend Robin Hood story. I love it so much. It's 5 stars. It's really, really good. I definitely recommend it. And the last 2 books I wanted to talk about were not really DNFs, but kind of DNFs. The first one is The Master Craftsman by Kelli Stuart. I was reading this at the beginning of the month, and I got like 140 pages in before I DNF'd it. I was reading at the beginning of the month, and I had gotten my copy of Guard Her Heart, and I was like, well, I really need to read this one, and I'm not really vibing with this one right now, so I'm just going to put this down and do my arc read of Guard Her Heart, and then I'll come back to it. And then I just never came back to it. I just kept getting other books throughout the month to read and never came back to this one. I am planning on finishing it at some point, just not right now. It's got 2 timelines. It's a timeline during the Russian Revolution and then a timeline in the modern day. And I really enjoyed the historical timeline, the one during the Russian Revolution. Like, it's really, really interesting, and I want to finish it, so I will go back and finish this book at some point. But I wasn't loving the modern timeline. The main character in the modern timeline, she just really annoyed me for the most part. Like, I get that she has, like, issues that she needs to work out, and that's part of the plot, but she just seemed really bitter to me, and it kind of got on my nerves. So I wasn't really loving the modern timeline, but I was really enjoying the historical timeline, so I do want to go back and finish it. I just want to say one thing about this, and this is just my personal preference, but like, she made fun of like a vegan in this book, the girl in the modern timeline. Like, I guess her neighbor is probably vegan and I don't know what it was, like she was saying that her neighbor brought her some healthy vegan food because her neighbor was like, oh, well, you just look like you're tired and you're not really taking care of yourself, so I made you some food. And she literally, like, behind her back called her some kind of, like, freak or something. And I was like, oh, so your neighbor cared about you and brought you a healthy meal and you're just gonna degrade her behind her back. And it made me really mad. Not just because, like, it's rude to degrade somebody who does something nice for you, but because, like, I just feel like authors way too often use vegetarians and vegans as, like, the butt of a joke. And, like, I am a vegetarian, and I do eat, like, 80% vegan, not fully, but I am a vegetarian, and I do eat a lot of vegan for health reasons, because I believe it's a healthy lifestyle, and I want to do that. And it just always makes me feel like it just always, not to say it offends me, because I'm not very easily offended, but it just always bugs me a little when authors, like, make fun of vegetarians just to make a joke, because I'm like, there's actually quite a large population of plant-based eaters in the US and around the world, and there's a lot of reasons to do it. For me, I do it because it's a healthy lifestyle and I want to be healthy. Other people do it because it's sustainable. Other people do it because they believe in animal rights. And, you know, okay, it was like a few months ago, I was reading a Nicole Deese book, which I also ended up DNFing, and she was being set up on, like, this blind date with this guy, and she was, like, making marks against him, like, strikes, and when she saw that he was a vegetarian, she counted that as a strike. Like, she said she didn't want to date him because he was a vegetarian. And I was like, why? What's wrong with that? Like, and it just seems like the media makes vegetarians and vegans look really bad, like, especially if they're female. They're like, oh, well, if it's a female vegetarian, it's only because, you know, she's so obsessed with being skinny or everything. Like especially, like, you've seen all those, like, early 2000s teen movies where, like, it's always, like, the mean cheerleader that's the vegetarian, and the nice main character girl is, like, super into, like, burgers and stuff. And I'm like, y'all, that's fine. You know what? I love a good veggie burger. It's really good, but I don't know. It just seems like authors and books and the media, they use vegetarians and vegans as the butt of the joke. And being a vegetarian myself for health reasons, I'm like, what is wrong with my lifestyle? Like, why are you guys intent on making fun of it? Especially as Christian fiction authors. Like, this is a Christian fiction book and you're gonna call this character a freak because they're vegan? I don't get it, guys. Like, why is that funny? So yeah, that's a major tangent I just went off on. I'm sorry to go off on this long tangent, and it's really like not a big deal, but I don't know, it always bugs me when I see it in a book. So I'm like we're just people who make different choices, like, and being a vegetarian is not even that different of a choice. There's a large and growing population of vegetarian people. But anyway, major side tangent. So the other book that I want to talk about is the American Heiress Brides Collection. This one I also wouldn't call like a real DNF. It's just that I read like the first 3 short stories in this one, and then I got into the 4th short story, and I wasn't really loving that short story, so I kind of put it down to read other books instead, and then I just didn't pick it back up. But I will finish it, and I'll even finish the short story that I wasn't really loving. I just set it down to read some other stuff, and then I didn't get it back up before the end of the month. So, yeah. So that concludes my video on my October reads, and I'm sorry for the major tangent I went off, like, and if y'all have ever laughed at a joke about vegans or vegetarians, don't worry, I'm not mad at you. It was just a tangent. Anyway, just my thoughts. Yeah, so those are my October reads, and I will see you in the next video.